All right. Sorry about that. So I think we're live now. This is John Martin from the KJC law firm, and I'm here with I Am Resilience and
Yes.
its founder, Ricky Kidd. What's up,
Yes.
man?
Yes, I'm good. I'm good, John. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm so excited. Thank you for doing this. This is really exciting to have you. I know that you are a hot commodity right now. People
Yeah,
are lining up to get you in.
yeah. You know what? It's been a whirlwind ride for me. From the day that I came home, the second I came home, all the media was there. I just simply engaged them based on my genuine self and the true nature of my experience, the facts in which I believe cause wrongful convictions. And I think from there, after it just started filtering its way out and people start hearing about my story and seeing that I was able to tell it in such a captivating and true way, it's been nonstop. And then COVID happened, slowed me down a little bit, but then we quickly pivoted to virtuals and it's been nonstop. So it's been a nice ride, man. It's been a nice ride because we get to tell the story of broken justice, what happens when the system gets it wrong, and then what we can do to make it right. So that's what's been making it exciting and worthwhile for me.
Amazing. So, for people who aren't familiar with your story yet, you were convicted of, was it murder or multiple murders?
Yes. So
What was the actual conviction?
great question. The conviction was first degree murder. 2 counts of first degree murder and 2 counts of armed criminal action. I was 21 at the time that the charge was put on me, and then I was 22 when the jury found me guilty and sentenced me to 4 lives without the possibility of parole. I was devastated, of course, as you can imagine, really in my early 20s, still a young man. And then I'm 45 now, John. And so if you do the math, that's 23 years in prison, 22 years before I went to prison. That means I spent more time in a place that I did not belong than I have in a place that I should have never left. And that's a sad commentary. We really need to work together to try to change this broken justice system.
Now, obviously you're out, but when the convictions happened, at the time, you'd actually told your lawyer about evidence that would have completely exonerated you. But what happened?
That's much to unpack, and
Yeah.
I'll try to with the limited time that we do have. I'm in the state of Missouri, for those who are chiming in from different states. And in the state of Missouri, our public defender system is ranked 49th as the worst public defender system in the country, 49th. And what makes it the worst, not necessarily that it's bad lawyers, but it's poorly funded. And then the lawyers' cases are stacked way beyond the number that they should have. And even good lawyers can get it wrong. And so in my case, there was plenty of evidence that could have shown early on that I was innocent. But my lawyer was so overwhelmed, overworked, and underpaid with all these clients that she had to see. There was no way possible that she was going to be able to properly defend a double homicide case. So much was left undiscovered or unverified, and it surely wasn't presented when it came time for my trial. And so that's essentially what happened. And what you are alluding to is the fact, the ugly fact, but the beauty that came out in the end was that I was telling the truth and where I said I was, which was at the Jackson County Sheriff Department. I was there applying for a gun permit because I had no felons at the time, and it was my right to do so. I stayed in a community that was not the best community, and so I wanted a firearm for my home. And that's where I was. The irony is that's where I was at the exact time that the homicide was taking place. That evidence could have came out. But again, the prosecutor tried to bury it, tried to skirt around it. And then my lawyer just didn't do a real good job at snuffing it out. In addition to that, I like to say this. Not only did the alibi at the sheriff's department, should it have, rendered me innocent, and I never should have faced a 23-year nightmare. But the prosecutor herself withheld key evidence. She discovered through sworn depositions from the real perpetrators that they was essentially tying themselves together, and short of admitting that they admitted that they committed the crime. And so once she discovered that, she knew that I was already charged. She likes to win, this particular prosecutor. And so what she decided to do was bury the whole thing as if she never heard from the true killers in the first place. That came out as of last year as well. But she has since been fired, and hopefully there's a process right now underway where she may very well lose her license. And I think rightfully so, she should.
It's unbelievable. So just to make sure that I have it clear, at the time the murder occurred, you were in the sheriff's office filling out paperwork and going through everything you needed to do to get your gun license, your license to carry.
That would be correct.
And the prosecutor buried it.
Well, my terminology is she buried it. What they did is, let me go ahead and unpack that so I can be clear, is they skirted around it. She called a Sergeant Buffalo. First of all, my overwork attorney didn't call nobody, which she should have. But the prosecutor was malicious, in my opinion, because she called a sergeant from the sheriff's department who did not handle that process at all. All the prosecutor had to do, and my lawyer as well, though, was look at the bottom of the police report document and see who was actually responsible for processing my application that day. So simple that many, many years later, that's what my lawyers did. My new team of lawyers simply looked at the document, looked up the badge number, and discovered who that sheriff was who processed it. They contacted her, they located her, they contacted her, and then she came to federal court and testified that there's no way that it would have happened on the 5th, which they tried to suggest at the time of my trial, that there's no way it would have happened on the 7th, which they again tried to suggest at the time of my trial, but that it indeed happened on the 6th and during this time frame right here. And she proceeded to break down exactly why that would have been the case. So I say, in my opinion, my lawyer was underworked, or rather overworked, and overwhelmed, but the prosecutor knew that just as well. But she was known for a lot of this type of hanky-panky work. But what I will say with clarity and as a matter of clear fact, she indeed and purposely buried the depositions of the real guys, essentially admitting that they committed the crime. She definitely did that without misscrewing anything.
That's just unbelievable. Just unbelievable. So the thing that you're known for, and I know that news stations and universities and criminal justice centers, and everybody wants to hear you talk about this, not just because of the legalities of it, and I know that there's a lot more legalities. It would probably take weeks to go through all of it, but the fact that in 23 years in maximum security prison, probably one of the most hopeless environments in the country, if not the world, you managed to become something, and you managed to earn your own freedom, and now you're out and you're advocating for community unity and personal strength and hope and faith. And I mean, just, I don't even know how to unpack all that. How did you do that?
Yeah, there's a piece in my book, Vivid Expression, that where I say I was forced to become the light, illuminating everything in sight. I was forced to become the oxygen if ever I was to breathe again. I actually want to read that piece before we go. Just 1 second. Could you find that piece for me in there? But that's what I was able to do. That's what I had to do. I was forced to become the light in this dark place. I knew that I did not want to die in prison for a crime that I did not commit. And I did not want to relinquish what power I found that I did have left after it sucked so much out of me. And so instead of flight, or rather fight or flight, when that comes into our mind, what I decided to do was fight. That was something that was important to me, and I really stumbled into my resilience by accident, to be honest with you. I am being trained, professionally trained now, about the full 10 facets that resilience consists of. But I kind of stumbled into it. And just really knowing that I had to survive, that if I did not get up, it's like being hit by a car and more cars are coming. And you know that you see these cars coming. And if you don't get up, the rest of you already been hit with a nice blow by the first car. But if you don't get up and these other cars reach you, it's over for you. It's clearly over. This Big Mac truck is not going to spare you. And so it was really like that in my mind, that I had to get up, I had to stand up, and I had to fight. That's what I did. And some of the ways that I did it was, I got anchored. These are one of the keys, 5 keys that I teach on. One is get anchored, where I had to stop and think. Wait a minute, get still. Get still so that I can regather my bearings. It's like a boxer who gets punched. He may have to grab the other boxer or go in a ring and then take a 30-second, 60-second timeout to regather his bearings so it can be clear where he needs to land his punches moving forward. And so the first thing I did was I was anchored. I got anchored. The second thing I knew is that I couldn't just stand there and keep getting hit. So I had to or rather B, is get moving. I knew I had to get moving. Now, physically, I couldn't get moving, but mentally in my mind, I knew that I had to keep things moving. And so I began to work on my case. I went to the law library. I was doing other things to work on my growth and development. I did not stop and get still or get stagnant. I knew that I had to keep moving. Also, getting moving allowed me not to spend a lot of time thinking about it day in and day out, where that can consume you and overwhelm you. The third thing that I did was I found my energy, because those two things can really zap your energy. Any challenge that anybody's facing, it has a tendency to zap your energy. And so I had to, and what I encourage people to do is 3, find your energy. Find what you need to live for, or what you need to get back up and get going for. For me, it was my faith. For me, it was my family. For me, it was knowing that I wanted to make a difference. I did not want this to happen to me without finding a way to make it matter to everybody out in the free world. And so I knew that I had to win. I had to fight. I had to survive, because I want people to know that the justice system is broken and that it can be fixed. And so I got moving. The fourth thing that I did, John, was I accessed perspective. And I really encourage a lot of people to, this probably should be number 1, but it's number 4 for a reason, is access perspective. And I like to say, look left, not right. Look left and not right, because to the right is everything that you want. It's everything that we want in the world. It's everything that we don't have. And it's everything that can get you down and sink you down in like a quicksand type of way. But to the left is where everybody has it worse than you. And then you in this position and you realize, you know what? I am in a bad shape. I'm in a bad situation. But when I look to the left, it could be much, much worse. It reminds me of a guy, or rather a story of a guy who wanted some shoes. He said, hey, I want some shoes. He was walking one day and he stopped at the bus stop and recognized there was a guy sitting next to him who didn't have feet. This is a common story. And so when he seen to his left that the guy didn't have feet, he realized that he's not doing so bad after all. He just needs shoes. Here it is. This guy here needs feet. And so perspective allows us to understand. It doesn't take it away. It doesn't make it less painful or less challenging, but it helps you calm yourself and then process moving forward. That was something that it was imperative for me to learn how to do. And the fifth thing that I did was to be selfless, rather live outside of myself. If I focused on me, if I said all the time, woe, it's me, and everything was just about me, that also can serve like quicksand or total darkness. In total darkness, you become delirious. In quicksand, you sink fast and you can end up losing the battle. And so being selfless and living outside of myself, what I did is I started taking programs. Then I started teaching programs. Then I went to the warden and asked, can I create this program? Can I create this program? And I wasn't creating the programs for myself because I had life without the possibility of parole. I began to live vicariously through other individuals who was inside prison. That's what I did, and that's how I survived those 5, or rather those 23 years using those 5 keys. Now I'm committed to sharing those 5 keys that's baked into the 10 facets of true resilience with the world this winter or this fall when things open back up. I'll be rolling out some classes and courses and workshops on how to actually activate your resilience and walk in it. But that's what I've been doing, really marrying the two, John. My story of broken justice and the spirit of resilience. Both our communities can learn from. Again, the story of broken justice, but also how you too, or we too, can be resilient at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Just phenomenal. And we've talked a couple times before tonight, and you were telling me that what you like most about, or one of the things that you teach or you like to teach most, is that it's not something that's unique just to you. Certainly you're unique, but that the things that you're talking about are common between us all. We shared some experiences with each other, and that these are things that anybody can learn to withstand just about any difficult situation.
Yeah. Man, I started I Am Resilience because when I first came home, I thought I was telling my story. I genuinely believed that I was telling my story, and I'm going to cross the country. I'm going to share with people. I'm going to inspire. But what I quickly began to realize was that other people had stories of resilience as well. Here it was, I was going to a school or to a university or to an organization or a small group, sharing my story, hoping to inspire, and it does, and it continue to. But what I realized is that they have a story too. They have a story too. I was at William Julius College, and the dean had come to me. I believe it was the dean or the guy right underneath, and him and his wife at the end, and they were saying thank you, and I was saying, thank you for having me and for allowing me to share my story. And his wife leaned in and she said, I am resilient too, and she shared to me her story. It was a health story of what, and rather a health challenge and how she survived. And immediately my hairs began to raise on my body, and it dawned off. A light bulb went off in my head. I'm not just telling my story. And confirmation to that came when they walked away. I was signing some books of my book here, Vivid Expressions. I want to read a piece before we go tonight and give the audience a taste. But as I'm signing books, this guy walked away, and another guy walked up and he said, "Do you know his story?" I said, "No, I don't." He said, and he shared to me what his situation was. It was tragic. It was very sad. And it was unlikely that he was going to live much longer. But you could not tell by the way he walked in his resilience. And it moved me to tears. And I walked home, or rather, I walked back to the car. And as I began to drive home, I realized this isn't just my story to tell. It's other people's story to tell, but people have not tapped into it. Usually we don't until we face that dark moment, or until we face those difficult challenges, is when we discover where we are resilient. And sometimes, John, people go through dark times or challenging times and still don't realize that they have a story connected to resilience. And so what I love doing is sharing with the people how they too are resilient. I love doing that. I love doing it. We've been doing it over here at IIR. We just launched on May 11th a campaign called #WeAreResilience, where we've asked everybody to participate in either taking a photo and then posting what you believe your resilience is, or turning a camera on yourself and give us a 30-second to 60-second video on what you believe your story of resilience is, and then then tag us over at I Am Resilient so we can share it. And what it was designed to do is offer us global connectivity and collective healing. I truly believe that, especially with what COVID had done to us all. If people had not identified what their independent or individual challenge was, then surely with COVID-19, we all can identify in some way what those challenges look like. And so I thought it was a unique way for people, A, to recognize that they too are resilient, but B, share it in a way that inspires others to make us realize we're not by ourselves. Global connectivity and collective healing. That's been the goal. And that challenge, by the way, is still going forward. Now, with you, I didn't know your story, my man. I didn't know your story. You and I sat down and we began to talk over a Zoom call. And lo and behold, you have this amazing story of resilience. You have a story of resilience, and everybody is looking to me, and that's fine. But
Mhm.
I find myself looking to others like yourself. People will say, Ricky, if I was in your circumstances, I would crumble. But I say to you, John, if I was in your circumstances, I would crumble as well. And I asked you, would you please, during this little part of the segment, be willing to share just a little bit, or as much as you're comfortable sharing, why you believe you are resilient, or what made us talk about your ability to be, your whole family's ability to be resilient?
Yeah. My son Jack was born with first of all a genetic condition called Smith-Lemli-Opitz. So he was born with some pretty severe disabilities, and that we found out within about a week of when he was born. And then about 3 months after that, we found out that he had a terminal illness that has an incredibly low rate of survival called pulmonary vein stenosis, which is the pulmonary veins that connect the heart to the lungs clog. So he needed open heart surgery at about 3.5 months old, and had to go through chemotherapy for the first 3 years of his life, had about 13 or 14 catheterizations. He's, fed through a tube. It's a happy ending for us. He's doing really well right now. But yeah, we were, when he turned 3 years old, he weighed about 12.5 pounds because he just threw everything up. He was sickly. He was on chemo. He was getting shots every day. He was just, it was a very, very difficult life for him. And I do think that there was, just like you said, a lot of choices that had to be made along the way, that did lead our family to become very resilient, because we had to provide him with a good quality of life. We had to provide each other with a good quality of life. There was certainly no guarantee as to the outcome. In fact, the odds were very, very, very much against us. So yeah, I agree. And the thing that you said that really got me, it was about the perspective and the selflessness. Because the minute I start thinking, and it's true to this day, I'm tired or I'm overwhelmed, or anytime I'm focusing on me, things tend to slow down. But when I'm focusing on other people or the tasks at hand, the things that I can actually control,
Yes.
life is a lot better and things
Yes.
go a lot better.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about the things that you could control. So you're in prison, and basically every single comfort and enjoyable thing that we take for granted in our lives is gone.
Gone.
And 23 years, what made you decide to start taking up these appeals on your own? And how did you get it as far as you did before because you eventually got help from the Innocence Project, right?
Yes.
How did you get their attention? What did you do?
Consistent, just being consistent, really going in fight mode. I looked myself in the mirror and I said that I didn't want to be a victim no more than what they already made me out to be, but that I wanted to be a victor. It's also brought into a mindset. And I tell people, again, I love using boxing analogies. It's like Rocky Balboa fighting against his opponent and really getting whooped pretty bad. And you just realize that, I'm not going to lose this fight. I don't want to lose. I don't want to die. I don't want my story to end like this. And on these shirts, you'll see that many people have been wearing, and I really appreciate that. And I really want others to.
Yes.
Yeah, it says the pen is in your hand. And what I did is I decided that, I can put the pen in my hand. Listen, John, and to all the listening audience, we don't get to choose. Often we don't get to choose how our struggles or our challenges begin, but we do get to choose how they end. And the pen is in your hand. That is my slogan, only because that was my mantra and my lifestyle for 20 3 years. No matter what happened to me, I was committed to rewriting this narrative and making sure that I did not lose or it did not go the way that the state of Missouri wanted to go, because I was innocent, I was worthy, and I was up for the challenge. And so that's what I did day in and day out. As days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, that's what I continually woke up to do. Now, I lost 11 times before I won that one time. Again, 11 times before I won just that one time. But I knew that it only took one. And I want people out there to know that if you're fighting, if you're struggling, if you're trying, to keep trying, because all it takes is one. You only need one. And that's what I finally got. Now, even going back to your question, I wrote hundreds of letters over the years. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. In fact, 100 at a time. And I must have done that 10 or 20 times over the course of all those years. I would go buy 100 stamps, 100 envelopes. I would go write out a form letter, and I'll go copy it 100 times, and I'll give me 100 addresses, churches, organizations, law firms, and I would write them. And then I would follow up. If I wrote you, I'm going to mark down when I wrote it, and then I'm going to follow up 30 days later and then see if you can really help me, or if you forgot and maybe you was considering helping me. That's exactly what I did, and that's exactly what happened with the Midwest Innocence Project. Professor Sean O'Brien, and investigator named Dan Grovehouse. I kept writing until one time, one person decided to listen. And even though I lost 11 times, it was the one time that the Honorable Judge Darren Atkins decided that it was time Ricky Kid come home. And now that's not enough for me. We're at the beginning stages of working on a documentary called When Innocence Is Not Enough. And really what it depicts is how my innocence was actually proven 10 years ago in 2009. But the state argued with me for an additional 10 years as if innocence was not enough. But the documentary also is going to depict how when I came home, innocence was still not enough. It wasn't enough for me just to come home and say, hey, I'm free, because I'm now aware that many other individuals are not free. And that's a part of my crusade as well over here at I Am Resilience, to teach people how to activate their resilience, but also to pick up the torch and push and press for criminal justice reform in this country.
So one word you just brought up that I want to dig into just a little bit, because I know that you have some good topics that you want to discuss tonight, is you use the word innocence. And, most people know that in the criminal world, not guilty simply means that the state failed to prove the crime beyond a reasonable doubt. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person's innocent. Great example, kind of famous example, is the O.J. Simpson case. But in your case, they didn't overturn your conviction on a technicality. They found you innocent by clear and convincing evidence, which is a very high standard.
Yeah, very high standard, the highest in the state of Missouri. In fact, if I am correct, and I believe I am, the only other because they're, like you said, and the listening audience don't always know, innocence may just mean that there was a technicality and a probability, or maybe even a likeliness that you might be innocent. That is one version. And then those individuals sometimes are not fully innocent in the full sense. But there's another standard. It's a very high burden that nobody in the state of Missouri has met, except for another guy named Joe Amron, who was on death row. And for years, they only gave it to, or said it was, that standard was only reserved for death row inmates because of the severity and the importance of life. If you had life without, and you had clear and convincing evidence, it was not enough as a freestanding claim. Now, I don't want to unpack all of that, because that'll take us in a different direction. But to your point, absolutely true that they ruled that it was clear and convincing. Not only did I not commit the crime, we was able to prove, and the courts was able to acknowledge who did commit the crime. And you don't get that as well in a lot of cases. You may get the guy out, you may be able to prove comfortably that he didn't do it, but it's not often that a criminal defense team get to prove that the client didn't do it and who actually did. And we was able to do both.
That's just amazing. I mean, that's just so incredibly rare. That's a needle in a haystack,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, want to be true to our flyers because I could ask you legal questions for days and I could
Sure.
ask you personal questions for days, but you are part of your teaching has to do with commonalities between people, between communities, and specifically, we wanted to talk about it because of what's going on and what happened with George Floyd. And
Yes.
I know that the George Floyd murder, because that's what it was, really brought some strong feelings for you. So can you tell us about that?
Oh, absolutely. George Floyd, of course, was murdered. Everybody saw it with their own eyes. And sadly, some people, there's a fraction of our society who don't give a damn or still believe that it was justified. That's kind of sad. And I think
Mhm.
some of that come from our bias, in
Mhm.
my humble opinion. And it speaks to the topic that we're talking about tonight, or rather that we are attempting to unpack: commonalities versus our differences. And what we think is we have so much different. We are different hues. We live in different neighborhoods. We work and spend in different tax brackets, and all of that is true. Something about the human mind, how we tend to gravitate towards negativity, or we gravitate to what our differences are, opposed to good news and what our commonalities are. And for
Mhm.
me, I tend to look at it a little different. When I meet you, I'm not immediately interested in what our differences are. I'm interested in what our commonalities are. And that's easy to unpack. Even with George Floyd, they took his life innocently, undeservingly. So what I saw in my mind is they took my life. Of course, they didn't take my final breath as they did his, but they took my life innocently and undeservingly. So I was able to connect with that. He suffered at the hands of a broken justice system. I suffered at the hands of a broken justice system. And so I was immediately able to connect with the commonality between George and I. And then it was much deeper for me because although they took George Floyd's last breath, fortunately for me, they did not take my last breath. And I can only imagine, had they not took George Floyd's last breath and he went through it maybe within an inch of his breath, he probably wouldn't have been able to get up from that ground, and he might have been a strong advocate speaking out against injustice. And so that's another, even in his even in a post-mortem phase that George Floyd is in now, I still believe and I still connect with him, and I feel that it's even more urgent. It's even more urgent now to speak out about criminal justice reform. And I'll be quite candid: resilience was on the front burner for me, so to speak, and criminal justice was on the back. Now, I did go testify before lawmakers since I've been home. I've been champion for other innocent men, signing petitions, participating in peaceful protests, but it was still considered on the back burner for me. But when this happened, the connection was so strong that I now put it on the front burner, or at least kind of running parallel again, where we can really do something about the state of police brutality, mass incarceration, racial profiling, wrongful convictions, unfair sentencing, all these things that plague the country. And whether you white, black, brown, or green, it impacts us in ways that we don't even realize. Even as a white man, or a white rich man, or an Asian man, or any individual who feel like that's not me, when you send the wrong person in prison, you're paying for it. Taxpayers foot the bill of what it costs to keep an innocent person in prison for 20 years, which is about $500,000. And then if you believe the numbers that about 100,000 or 115,000 people are innocent across the country, you do 500,000, which is times 20 years, and that's the average stay before somebody is exonerated, times 100 and 115,000, you're talking about billions of dollars with a B, billions of dollars that American taxpayers pay footing the bill. You think you don't have a dog in a fight, but your money is actually in the fight, and it's being misappropriated and misused. Secondly, when the right person, rather when the wrong person is in prison, the right person who actually committed the crime is in a free society, leaving that community at risk for another rape or home invasion, or God forbid, another murder where somebody lose their life. And so those are some commonalities that even when we see that it's not me, or it doesn't seem like this situation affect me, look for what is common in the cause. Look what is common in the protest. Look for what is common in the push. And I think it can push us into a different space in our mind where we can begin to have real intellectual dialogue about what this looks like moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because I know that you're a strong advocate for reform, and with good reason. In fact, I've heard the term, and I believe it, that we have an innocence crisis in this country. But I've also seen some of your advocacy firsthand, and I know that on social media this week you posted a lot of images of Black men and women interacting with police officers, shaking hands, embracing, hugging, protesting together, talking together, speaking together. It seemed to be a very peaceful and loving message.
Yeah. And it speaks to what we're speaking about. Commonality in our differences. Commonality, essentially, even though we're different. And it was my obligation to put those stories out on my social media platforms, because oftentimes the narrative is the opposite. And I tend to believe that mainstream news like to do that for ratings. I don't believe that they're evil by nature. I do believe that the people work there are good people, but I think they get sucked into this wrong notion, this machine thinking opposed to this human thinking, and they put out these images and filter them out as if this is the only narrative. Now, it is true, they're not making it up, but where's the other version of it? In all fairness, where I got some of the videos from, or some of the images, was from news or from social media. So I'm not saying that they're not putting it out neither. What I am saying is they're not putting it out in proper proportion to the negative images. And so what I wanted to do was use my socials to make sure that people understand that, wait a minute, we can find commonality in our differences. I did go on KSHB 41 News here locally in Kansas City, and I talked about commonalities and our differences and where we need to go moving forward. Now, that is not the same as excusing officers or bad behavior or not holding our elected officials accountable. I 100% believe in that. What I don't believe in is what could be considered as reverse racism or reverse bias, where 5 officers do some horrible stuff. They need to be fired immediately and sent to prison like the criminals they became. But what about the other thousands of officers who had nothing to do with it, who wake up every day in an honest way to serve and protect? I don't think they should be lambasted or blasted or degraded in the work that they do. I don't subscribe to that at all. In fact, I compare it to the same reason why they tend not to like us, because they probably had some bad experiences with people of my hue, or somebody bald-headed, or somebody sagging, or somebody with some braids, and they made up in their mind that the next person and every individual after that is like the same individual. I really believe that. And so we can't fix that by mimicking that. I don't think that that's a winning formula moving forward. We must protest because that's our constitutional right, but we also must move from protest to policy and find commonalities in our differences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a sensitive subject right now, because there are a lot of really good police officers, and in fact, I would say the majority of them are. One thing that I don't hear people talking a lot about is the environment that police work in. I've represented a lot of police officers, and I'll tell you that in some departments, if a police officer speaks up or speaks out or files a complaint or exposes a bad cop, it's not a pleasant place for them to work anymore. And that kind of, thin blue line in some ways is a band of brothers and sisters who, unite for a dangerous job. But in other ways, that thin blue line is a code of silence that covers up bad behaviors and allows things like this to fester.
Yeah, sure. I want to say this to that point. Beautiful point. Factual, and everybody know it's true. It's not a stretch. It's not a guess. Here's the reality, though. John, if you and I were police officers and you were my riding buddy, We ride together. We have each other's back, and we should have each other's back when we out there doing the right thing. I believe in that. It's us. Hoorah, we're together. Yes. Until you go rogue, John. If you go rogue, I can't stand behind you because it is bigger than me and you. The police department is not John and Ricky or Ricky and John. It is the Kansas City Police Department, not John and Ricky's police department. It's Boston. It's Boston, Massachusetts Police Department, or whatever those departments are called down there, not the John and Ricky Police Department. The problem with that, to me, and this is a fix that needs to start here, is that we have to begin to find commonality in our differences and recognize that we are a part of the police officers are a part of a greater community than with the police officers are part of a greater community than their own community and their own unity within the force. The people put them there. The people trusted them. And I have to turn to you and say, hey, John, you didn't put me here. The people put me here, and the people trust in us. I have to do this, man. You messed up. And what that does is that keeps everybody in check. Really, the common culture now says, go ahead and do your job right, because we want you to. But in the case that you do your job wrong, don't worry about that neither. We're going to make sure it's right. We have to change that culture and that mindset. People are thinking that the message is them or that the mission is them, and the message and the mission is not the police department. The message and the mission is to serve and protect the community. And until we could change those mindsets or put people in office as mayor or as chief of police in those offices who stands at that hill and says, we're not going to tolerate it. We're going to support you 100% when you're right, and we're going to 0% support you when you're wrong. I think it would discourage officers from doing the wrong thing knowingly or going rogue, as it did in George Floyd's case.
Oh, absolutely. You know, the holding people accountable makes a big difference. You know, the speed limit sign is not what stops people from speeding. It's the tickets that they get when they're caught that keeps people from speeding. And if there's no accountability, you know, you see what happens, like what happened with your prosecutor. If your prosecutor thought for 1 second that she would be held accountable, possibly lose her job for what she was doing, she would have behaved different.
Sure.
But she has qualified immunity.
Yeah.
Anyways, immunity is another topic. I'm just so fascinated. I keep going off, but I know that one of your conflict resolutions and one of your things that you teach about is that to resolve issues like that and dealing with commonalities, you start with, what do we want? We all want the same thing. Describe to me how that works for this very volatile situation between African Americans and the police. How do we use what we all want to start building a tighter community here?
Sure. When you really take the layers, they say in religion, I'm not going to talk about religion and I'm not going to fully unpack it, but I do think that I can speak on it in a way that can give your audience perspective. They say that there's 6 layers to all religions, and the outer 3 is what splits us with rituals, traditions, and customs. The rituals, traditions, and customs on the outer 3 is what make you pray this way, what make me do these things, and what actually pulls us in different directions. But at the center of those 3 are different things where we find are important. We're looking for salvation. We're looking for guidance, purpose, meaning. Those things are all centered inside of every religion. Those are commonality and our differences. Now, when we pan out, of course, we're not talking about religion here. We're talking about African Americans and police departments, typically white police departments. Where do we find our commonality, or really for any individual for that matter? Where do we find our commonality in the workplace, in our community, wherever we may travel? And it is in the fact that we all want to live. We all want to laugh. We all want to make a living. We all want to love. We all want to be acknowledged. We all want to be heard. We all want to be treated fair. We all want to live peaceful. We all want to live in a place that's safe. We all love our family. Many of us love this country. Like there's so many commonalities that we can really begin to look at. Really, people say, "Oh, I'm colorblind," but you're not. And then our culture and society teaches us this. No baby that I know of, and no science that I've read of, has shown that a child come out racist or a child comes out with hate. It's taught. And where is it taught? It is taught in our culture. I will be working on a special TikTok here in the next few days. And I do some fun and dancing, but some of them are still very important. And I'll be releasing one. Oh, in fact, I released one yesterday. I was really wanted everybody to get a good laugh. I hope they did today. If they saw me on TikTok, it's Mr. Resilience or Ricky the Kid. You go there, have some fun, and learn a little bit about what we're doing. But I'll be doing one here in the coming days that really unpacks, and I don't want to give it away, but it really takes the layers back. I don't even think some people want to hate. I don't. I don't think some people, it's just that's what my father taught me, or that's what my community taught me. How do I know? Because I talk to people every day. I had a doctor's appointment just the other day, and as I was coming out, I was talking to a white lady who knows what I do and trust and believe in some of the things that I'm doing, and she was willing to talk to me one-on-one in private, and she talked about her neighbors and her friends who are racist and who's been saying all these racist things, and she's trying to combat it. She's trying to combat it. And we had a real intelligent conversation about where it comes from, because she said she too comes from that environment, but she had to realize that it was a false narrative. Hate and racism is a false narrative. And until we can get our counterparts to see that, our brothers and sisters who are not of the same hue to see that, then we're going to continue to have this conflict, and we're going to continue to have these type of issues keep showing itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a hard thing to accept for a white person. There's a lot of things that we don't experience, right? And a lot of people believe that if I don't feel hate in my heart, I'm not racist. I'm not condoning racism, and if I ever saw it, I would call it out. But in our own practice, where we do a lot of civil rights cases, we've had racial discrimination, harassment, sexual, gender orientation. I mean, at the highest levels of government, at the highest levels of corporate America, some of the cases have gone to verdict. Some of the cases have been settled, but it's everywhere. And it's almost like two eagles are sitting around. They can't figure out why the field mouse keeps complaining about the owl. If it's not my problem, if I don't see it, I'm going to deny it because it's such a distasteful thing. But it's a conversation that has to happen, and it has to happen at the highest levels. But I know that you have a mission, and I know that COVID has really disrupted it. So I was going to give people information about how they can help support your mission at the bottom of the screen here. But I was wondering, can you tell us a little bit about what's next? Where are you going? What are you doing? How are you spreading this message, and how can we help you?
Sure. Thank you. Very, very, very humble by that, John. I really appreciate that. A lot of people ask, where's the compensation? Did they give you compensation? In the state of Missouri, the answer to that is no. There's no compensation for individuals, even though that high standard came down legislation. That's what I was testifying back in March before state representatives, urging them to pass a bill that offers an exoneree a compensation packet when he come home. And so I came home 9.5 months ago with nothing. It's been friends, family, strangers who become friends who reached out and said, no, that's not right. We got you. We're going to support you either through donations, either through buying a book, either through buying a shirt, or either booking me. Sometimes my early bookings, before people knew that I had some authority on this subject matter and a lot of experience, before they even really knew that, they would throw me a bone, so to speak, and offer me a job just so they can line my pockets with a little cash until I'm able to get up and get going and get on my feet. That's really still the case for me, John. Now, I was headed in that direction before COVID hit, but COVID has slammed all of us, even those who are who wasn't just now coming home, or who wasn't in as bad a shape as I was. COVID has whooped a lot of butt, even big companies, and
Right.
it did.
It did. Well,
it did. Go ahead.
Just so it's clear to everybody, you've only been out of prison for what, 10 months?
Yeah, almost 10 months in here in a
So
few
not
days.
even so you've in the amount of time that you've been out, you've got your organization set up, you've
Yes.
published a book,
Yeah.
you've done many speaking engagements. I
Yes.
mean, you hit the ground running.
Yeah. I'm on a mission.
But COVID just stopped it.
Yeah, no. But it slowed. It didn't slow the message down because I pivoted to virtuals, but virtuals haven't paid, and so it's been a little struggle for me. And so what I tried to do instead of a handout, instead of a handout, I asked for a hand up, and I tried to go purchase T-shirts and ask people to participate and support the platform. Sometimes that happened less often than I would like it to happen. But I do ask that people go to resilienceMode.com if they have some disposable income to spare and really support the platform. Click at the top. There's a donate here button, and those proceeds allow me to sustain myself, but also to make appearances like this for free and not be able to charge. You don't want to go everywhere all the time and charge people for your experience, although sometimes I have to because I have to make a living and I'm committed to criminal justice reform. It helps when people say, Ricky, I like your mission. I believe in what you're doing. Let me help you along the way. People have done that. And had COVID-19 not hit, I probably wouldn't have had to look back and ask people to help or to click that donate button, but it did hit. And humbly, I have to ask, or I've been asking when opportunities present themselves, if people will please support the platform. If they don't want to outright donate, they can click the IAR gear icon and buy a shirt. That helps. They can go to Amazon.com and buy the book. That helps. If you're a college or entity that can use or benefit from my talk of broken justice or resilience, you can feel free to book me. All that can be found on resilienceMode.com. It could go a long way in helping me help others. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to even talk about it tonight.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you being here. I mean, I just can't emphasize it enough. When I Google you, you're on news stations, you're on, really big outlets. It's phenomenal. So if any of the KJC viewers or fans or clients would like to donate to Ricky's mission, I would match donations up to $1,000. And I'd also really like to know how we can get you to come out here in person. What type of organizations usually bring you in? What type of community resources can we gather together to get a live event with you here in the Northeast?
Sure, I would love to come. Scotland has already reached out about 3 weeks ago, and we're in the process. They're still on COVID lockdown, so they're coming up slower than the rest of the country. But whenever they come up safely, I'll be headed there. They don't even have an Innocence Project in the country, period. And so I'm going to work with some key people on the ground over there. They're going to bring me over there. So those are crowds, or those are audience who are interested in me sharing my experience and how to or why it may be important to get Innocence Projects going over there. But I've spoken to young minds about poor choices, innocent of my crime, guilty of poor lifestyle choices. I was a dealer ripping and running. And so I really try to caution kids not to do that. I do those for free. I can never charge that message. And we do a lot of those messages. But I also speak to colleges, to universities, bar associations, police departments, those individuals who are interested in learning about what I consider a cautionary tale. My story isn't a wag my finger in your face and ridicule you. It really is a commonality and differences. Can we really talk? Do we really want the justice system to work? I believe that side do. I believe I do. So let's come together and talk. And so anybody out there listening who is a college or who is a community college or a university, a group, sometimes individuals who care about their community. When I went to Spokane, Washington, initially a guy by the name of Bob Murphy, and I don't think he would mind me mentioning his name, he wanted something better for his community. And him and his wife said, you know what, we're going to bring you down here on our own, and then we're going to try to connect you with these different individuals who may not be able to pay you. And a lot of work that I did down there, they were not able to pay me, but he was able to cover the cost of my fee, travel expenses, and then get me down there to really share with the community. It was the police department, or rather it was the Kansas City the chief of police, the Spokane chief of police, prosecutor, a couple of judges, the community, the defense, a couple of public defender lawyers. We all was able to gather in a community center and really work out or have the beginning discussion about what needs to happen in Spokane, Washington. Now, listen, I'm in the Missouri. I live in the state of Missouri, but I was willing to travel to Spokane, Washington, because Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so it's important to me. This is my life mission. This is not fake. This is not fluff. I don't do this when a camera comes on. I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff day in and day out. I cry real tears. I work real hard. I study the issues, and I'm willing to show up and show out for the people who don't have a voice. I want to be the voice for those who are voiceless, and I want to share my experience so others don't have to go through my experience. That's what it's been like for me, John. That's what I've been doing. I also say that we get to do this together. Now, some may be watching and say, hey, I don't speak like you. I don't have your experience like you, but we still get to do this together. And how do we get to do this together? Because you can support. Listen, I'll never do that. I'll never travel. I'm scared to talk to people. But you know what? I support you because you're the guy that's going out there and doing it. And that's how we get to do it together, folks. That's exactly how we get to do it together.
Mm-hmm. So if I was to summarize the resilience, and I'm not going to use your elements because I know that's a big part of your presentation, but you have your mindset, your recognition of the challenges that you face, you have your selflessness, and then of course you have to take action, massive action, and I assume that you read a lot of things or got this inspiration to dig into this resilience and to develop this course of action that helped you and you're now using to help so many other people. So here's that was a big wind up for the question because we're just about done here. What's the worst advice you ever got and what's the best advice you ever got?
Easy.
No, I'm scared.
What the worst advice I ever got was give up. They told me to give up. When I was in prison, guys would tell me to give up. You're never getting out of here, Rick. And even the small percentage of people who might be positive in prison, after they see me lose time and time again, my story would be on the news. Innocent men may be getting out, big hearing. They covered all my big hearings. And after I was crushed and thrown under another bus, or the pebbles and the rocks and the debris of a mountain came falling down on me, so many times that happened, people would say, close friends of mine, give up. Rick, and I'm being sincere here. They would say, give up. Go try to work on something where you can live from prison because it don't look like you're ever getting out. Like create programs that helps people understand prison, something that you can do. Because I know you're trying to live a meaningful life, Rick, but bro, they never going to let you go, man. It's like you're wasting your time.
Mm-hmm.
Worst advice. Best advice?
Yeah, what's the best advice?
My best advice has been from my lawyer, Professor Sean O'Brien. He knew my heart. He knew, listen, I was fired up and ready to go years before I came home. I didn't just decide this stuff. I was like a basketball player sitting on a bench begging to put me in the game, coach. And they would tell me, temperance, Rick, temperance, slow down. Let us get you home first. And as we got closer and believed that it could finally go my way, he said, he reached across the table and he said, I want to give you a piece of advice. He said, I know you want to matter. And I said, yeah, I want to matter. On my tombstone, it's going to say, I came, I lived, I mattered. I came, I lived, I mattered. So yes, I want to matter, Sean. He said, do me one favor, or let me give you a piece of advice. Make it before you matter. Make it before you matter. He said a lot of people try to matter before they make it, and they drown trying to matter for the people who they're fighting for. And so make it before you matter, Rick. make it first. Get yourself together first, because I know you're going to get out here and I know you're going to try to do all these different things, but make sure you're taking care of yourself. Making it mean take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, financially, and then you're in a much, much better position to matter. But here's what I did. A, I silenced the critic. I did not give up. I absolutely did not give up. And B, I modified even that advice. I said, how about I make it while I matter? And really, that's what IR is doing over here. We're making a difference for my own self and mattering at the same time. I found a way to not just, and I look up to this guy. I mean, totally, he's like a father figure to me and a hero. But I took what he said, and I didn't take it and run with it. I took it, modified it, and then ran with it. I decided that I was going to make it and matter at the same time. And again, that's what we do over here at I Am Resilience, and any support and love and contributions will be much appreciated. So again, I really appreciate you bringing that up about 5 minutes ago or so.
Sure. Yeah. And I really appreciate you doing this. And I'm really looking forward to when we can get you out here to Boston live and maybe some other cities around here. So we're getting just over an hour. That's a lot longer than we usually do. So I'm gonna wrap it up. I just want to thank you again, and thank Don, and thank everybody at I Am Resilience for making this happen. And do you want to finish us off with reading a selection from your book?
Yeah, I do.
That'd be great.
I like to give everybody a piece of spoken words. I wrote this book while I was in prison over the course of the 23 years. The first half of this book was written the first 10 years. The second half was written the second 10 years. And you can see its intelligence, whether it's maturation, its growth from the first chapter or first half, part one, to the second half, part two, where I really found my voice. People often ask, Ricky, when or where did you find your voice? And this shows, or rather answers that question. Another question, John, and to your listening audience, people always ask is, how did you make it? How did you make it? And so this book is called Vivid Expressions, a journey inside the mind of the innocent. It kind of takes you down through there, exactly how I made it and what was it like. I want to read this piece called Resiliency. It's fitting for the topic tonight and for what we do over here at IR. And it reads as follows. Resiliency, that's me. Lungs filled with smoke and fumes. Still I crawl from beneath the rubble. Sure, I've struggled in the midst of debris. Sure, I was supposed to drown while being lost at sea. You can call me Ricky or Resiliency. Turbid winds blow, face buried beneath the snow. My entire life was frostbit. When my existence went numb, my spirit refused to quit. Few could ever handle their life being dismantled, surrounded by total darkness, not so much as even a candle. I was forced to become the light, illuminating everything in sight. I was forced to become the oxygen if ever I was to breathe again. Floundering on my pathway, I was almost halfway, only to realize I was going the wrong way. What I discovered more stunning was that the cavalry wasn't coming. I was trapped inside a dungeon, but never feeling like I was done in. Maybe it was because I let the sun in. Try living in a place without the sun in. Try being buried alive and still managing to survive. Try walking among the dead but refusing to die. I refused to capitulate. I appealed to a higher fate, and I was knowing in my growing and many blessings await. And the more I orchestrated came the resilience of my brilliance. How I made it is the question, but there's no question to my resilience.
Unbelievable. You get away with words, my friend.
Yeah. Thank you, John. Thank you. Appreciate you. And thank everybody who tuned in tonight, who cared and decided to share your evening with us. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, your passion's just infectious. And thanks again. Looking really forward to having you here in person and hearing more about your book. I got the book. I just started it, and I'm just really looking forward to seeing how this all plays out. I know that we're just at the beginning with you, and it's going to be amazing. Thanks again, man.
Yeah, thank you too. God bless and good night, guys.
You too.